Tune into Nice Radio every Saturday at 7:30 a.m. for A View from the Outside, hosted by Brereton Horne. A View from the Outside takes a look at key issues affecting St. Vincent and the Grenadines and gives a global perspective on how these issues are viewed. Host Brereton Horne will examine a variety of topics to enlighten, stimulate debate, and explore solutions. Hear the facts, hear the real-life stories, hear A View from the Outside. Join Brereton Horne at 7:30 a.m. every Saturday on Nice Radio for A View from the Outside.
This society needs a spectacle. It might help us to see some people.
On A View from the Outside this week being the 13th of February 2021, we look at Black History Month, with the view being that as Vincentians recognize Black History Month, we ought to spend time to identify and acknowledge the accomplishments of ordinary Vincentians. Black History Month is celebrated in the USA and Canada in the month of February. It is also acknowledged in the month of February in many other countries around the world, including St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It is observed in Ireland, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom in the month of October. Black History Month has its origins dating back to the early 20th century, when prominent Black individuals and organizations agitated to have a period of time dedicated to recognizing Black identity and the achievements of African Americans. However, it was not until 1976 that the month of February was declared Black History Month by the then President Gerald Ford. In his speech announcing February as Black History Month, President Ford encouraged Americans to, and I quote, seize the opportunity to honor the too often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of every endeavor throughout our history, unquote. Since then, the month of February in the USA is dedicated and celebrated for just that, Black history. And many countries around the world, including St. Vincent and the Grenadines, now do the same. Today, as Vincentians recognize Black History Month, we, on A View from the Outside, dedicate this program to encourage all Vincentians to seize the opportunity to honor the too often forgotten or overlooked accomplishments of Vincentians, especially ordinary Vincentians, and to make every effort for the contributions made by our own not to go unremembered. As we revere and laud others from different parts of the region and the world, let us spend some time to identify and celebrate some of our own people. Identify, recognize, and celebrate the ones who appeared simple, simple, but whose contribution has impacted the lives of many in some aspect of Vincentian society. Identify the ones in your local area. Think about the different spheres of life and try to identify their accomplishments. Think about who has excelled in agriculture in your local area and possibly on a national scale. Do the names Frederick Oliver, Lennox Lampkin, Samuel Barnwell, and many more mean anything to you in the area of farming and agriculture? We have to give credence to our own people, identify them, recognize them, and celebrate them. Think about those in education, principals, teachers, and others. Think about them and the significant contribution they have made and make in your own life, as well as the lives of others in the community. Recognize them, celebrate them. In that regard, names like Alban Henry, Alfonso Denny, Norma Jackson, Nee Richards readily come to mind. Also in the sphere of education, how many of us remember the name of the former Chief Education Officer, the late Festus Toney, and the contribution that he made in education in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? These people and their contributions must never be allowed to be forgotten. Think about model civil servants such as Owen Coffey, who, despite their personal politics, dedicated their lives and acted impartially and impeccably in the execution of their duties. Identify them, recognize them, celebrate them, possibly model them. In the area of health, think about our doctors, nurses, midwives, etc. This list, no doubt, will include Dr. Cecil Cyrus and many others, less well known, who have all made their mark on the delivery of healthcare in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. For those in the Mount Grennan Village, Diamond, Newgrounds area, those surrounding areas, does anyone remember the midwife, Adina Missen Horne, the Vincentian heroine from Diamond Village, and the contribution she made as the local midwife who attended to many pregnant mothers and aided in the safe delivery of their children? You think about those in your own area and recognize them and celebrate them. In sports, we encourage you to do the same. Remember the many great footballers, cricketers, including Michael Finley, Winston Davis, and others. Netballers, such as mother and daughter Gloria Ballantyne and John Ballantyne. Athletes, Pamela Ballantyne, and many others, who have all made their marks locally, regionally, and in some cases internationally. Identify them, recognize them, and celebrate them. In culture and music, we must recognize and celebrate those who made their contributions in that area. How many of us know about the life and times of Sheikh Keane? He is well known in the UK, Germany, around Europe, and in North America for his adeptness as a jazz musician and a poet. Celebrate him, recognize him, celebrate him. How many of us remember all those great calypsonians that we've had in St. Vincent over the years? The Manage and others, Beckett and others. Do we remember and celebrate the contributions of Judy Boucher? We ought to. And we ought to remember and celebrate the contribution of One Love Bassie Alexander. Are we remembering the recently deceased Ferrand Randy Dopwell? We will ensure that he's remembered for his contribution and his untiring efforts to laud and promote St. Vincent and the Grenadines every opportunity he had to do so. We all have to play our part in recognizing, remembering, and celebrating him. Let us not forget our historians, including Dr. Edgar Adams, Dr. Adrian Fraser, and many others. We must remember them. We must recognize them. We must celebrate them. In law enforcement, think about the policemen and women who actually dedicated their lives to protect and serve the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Remember those who made their mark in politics also. George Charles, Ebenezer Theodore Joshua, and many others who are less well known. Remember our women in politics. Ivy Joshua, the wife of Ebenezer Theodore Joshua, Yvonne Francis Gibson, and others. Remember the contributions that they have made to the Vincentian discourse. We must always remember them. They must always be remembered. They must always be mentioned in the discourse of politics in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Let us too remember Oscar Brother A. Allen for the contributions which he made in his endeavor to bring about social justice for Vincentians. We, here on A View from the Outside, reiterate and we emphasize that while we remember the well-known names of those who have made their marks, let us also make the effort. We emphasize and we remind you to also make the effort to remember and celebrate the contributions of those less known. You will know who they are. They live or have lived in your local area. You and others in your local area would have experienced their contributions directly. Remember them, celebrate them. Let us remember too that as we think internationally about Black History Month, many of those who we recognize and celebrate today as heroes were at one time viewed as agitators, renegades, and outcasts. Nelson Mandela, who is now revered around the world as one of the best statesmen ever, the man after whom a highway in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is named, was at one time barred or branded as a terrorist and a murderer. Rosa Parks, the woman who helped change the course of history for Black people, particularly Black people in the United States of America, was at one time branded a troublemaker and a crackpot. Martin Luther King Jr., Marcus Mosiah Garvey, Malcolm X, Steve Biko, Winnie Mandela, and many others were all at one time or another treated as outcasts and troublemakers. We celebrate them today. Today, in our Vincentian setting, there are some acts and some individuals that are viewed in a similar light as those who were branded in the past as crackpots, troublemakers, renegades, agitators, and outcasts. However, the time may well come when we will view them differently and celebrate them for standing up for us. In that regard, we will do well here to remember the words of writer, poet, and social activist James Baldwin, who said, and I quote, "We can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist." In this episode of A View from the Outside, Black History Month, we have tried to stimulate your thoughts to identify, recognize, and celebrate our local Vincentian heroes. While we have just whetted your appetite and mentioned just a few names here, we leave you with the task of continuing the conversation with your family, friends, neighbors, fellow villagers, those in your towns and wider communities. We hope that you will debate and decide who others are in your local area particularly, and possibly on a national level, who you believe ought to be singled out for recognition and praise. We encourage you to ensure that in this Black History Month, Vincentians get the recognition which they deserve from you. Identify them, recognize them, celebrate them. Until next week, Justin and all of the listeners, this is Brereton Horne with A View from the Outside, with a reminder to send your feedback as usual to aviewfromtheoutside@hotmail.com. We also invite you to visit and like our Facebook page at A View from the Outside, and also visit and subscribe to our YouTube channel at JMB Horne. Have a pleasant Saturday, have a wonderful Sunday, and a productive week ahead. All the best to you, Justin, and the listeners.